Welcome to episode 292 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. Today's episode is all about the behavioral economics of Disney. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Today's episode is a behavioral economics analysis of Disney. Who doesn't love Disney? Am I right? This is nostalgia. This is our childhood. And these days, an opportunity to share that with our own children and grandchildren, and for some great-grandchildren. Disney is part of our culture and our entire upbringing. They are the epitome of storytelling. And beyond that, these days, they're a complex web of companies you may not even realize are owned by this massive conglomerate. But more about that as we dig in on the episode. This one originally aired in March of 2021, and if you aren't familiar with this format, it's an episode where I talk about a well-known company and their practices to share what concepts from behavioral economics and behavioral science I see in their work so you can see what you might want to emulate and what isn't a good fit for you and your company. And also, it's a fun way to see the things you experience all the time and say, oh yeah, I totally did that, to help you remember a concept and for it to feel real. So, why this episode from 2021 and why now? It's because of this coming Friday's episode where I'm joined by my friend Troy Campbell to talk about multi-narrative storytelling. What the heck is that, you may wonder? Of course, Troy's going to tell you all about that. So be sure to subscribe to the Brainy Business Podcast now for anyone who hasn't already, so you don't miss that one or any other episodes of the show. And while anything on great storytelling is a reason to loop in Disney, I also have Troy associated with Disney because he used to work there. He also did an extra training in my community, the Be Thoughtful Revolution, about how everyone can learn from Disney based on his experiences there. If you missed that one or just want to rewatch the replay, there is a way for you to join the free community and watch that replay. It's linked for you in the show notes, along with links to related past episodes and books and articles. It's all waiting for you inside the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/292. All right, let's talk about the wonderful world of Disney. First and foremost, as we jump in on this episode, it's important to acknowledge that Disney is a massive organization with many, many facets and paths I could have taken this episode down. I'd be willing to bet that there could be an entire podcast that's exclusively dedicated to the behavioral science of Disney, and it would never run out of content because there's just so much going on within this company. We could talk movies, merchandise, streaming services, theme parks, food items, cruises, other vacation packages, print materials, TV shows. The list goes on and on and on. That being said, I don't anticipate this being the only episode that ends up talking about Disney because there's just too much to cover in one go. I didn't even mention some of their main franchises like the entire Marvel universe, Star Wars, Pixar, Pirates of the Caribbean, Indiana Jones, The Muppets, The Chronicles of Narnia, Fox, ABC, ESPN. It's astonishing to think about everything they have going on within that company. Knowing coronavirus has impacted their numbers, before the pandemic, they were reported as having 210,000 employees and revenue of about $60 billion. That's before launching Disney Plus, which has been the most successful launch of a streaming service to date. And as you already know from episodes I've done on habits, streaming services are definitely taking advantage of that part of our subconscious brains. After Disney Plus launched in November 2019, they hit 10 million subscribers in the first 24 hours. One day. And shortly thereafter, they announced a goal that they wanted to hit 50 million subscribers by 2025. Instead of it taking 5 years, they hit that goal in 8 months. And as of February 2021, they are closing in on 100 million subscribers, touting just shy of 95 million on the service. For some context, there are only 2 streaming services that are bigger than Disney Plus right now. Amazon Prime, which launched in 2006 and has 112 million subscribers, and Netflix, which launched in 2007 and has 190 million subscribers. In a little over a year, Disney Plus is over halfway to being the largest streaming company in the world. And remember, that's just a small piece of the Disney empire. As we go through the episode today, I'm going to talk about just a bunch of different concepts in the brain and ways that you can see them within the Disney megaplex, I guess. Not really sure what to call that. So within these examples, they're pretty heavily focused on the traditional Disney stuff. So we're talking about theme parks, Disney World, Disneyland, as well as their movie franchises, and a little bit about Disney Plus. There's, some other things maybe sneak in here or there, but that's going to be the bulk of what gets focused on today as I'm talking about these concepts of behavioral economics that you can see within the work that's going on at Disney. So you may be asking, what makes Disney so special? What are they doing that makes them stand out from the crowd? And as you might have guessed, the answer is a lot. One big reason is their focus on innovation and always working to be better. Among the 210,000 employees I mentioned earlier, there are over 20 behavioral scientists, along with hundreds of Imagineers, creating the amazing features and attractions around the parks and experiences throughout the world. Disney has pushed boundaries since its inception, being the first animated film with synchronized sound when Steamboat Willie started it all back in 1928. This desire to be better and constantly improve has stuck with the company for over 90 years. They have an incredible talent for balancing expectations with surprise and delight in this beautiful dance that works with the brain's bias for the status quo in a really amazing way. There are several concepts mentioned there, and I'm going to dig in on this a little more for you as I explain what they're doing and how you can see it across some of their different platforms. Let's start with that park experience. When you go to Disneyland or Disney World or any other experience, you have a certain expectation for what you'll find. Those iconic rides you love are still there. The walk into the park at Disneyland has that Mickey face made out of flowers. You can choose from an assortment of Mickey or Minnie ears and check out the various areas of the park. You can meet characters and get themed treats. Your favorites are likely still there from the last time you visited, whether it was 2 years or 20. It's clean and friendly, and there will be parades and probably fireworks. If any of those things were to change, it could be a letdown and a negative experience. You'd have negative dopamine because your expectations weren't met, and it can tarnish their brand. However, they don't just stick with the status quo, so it isn't exactly like when you went to the park as a kid, something that would really go out of style and not be exciting or interesting anymore. We took our littles a few years back, and they had just opened the Guardians of the Galaxy ride, which was a remake of an old attraction and now much more relevant. Pirates of the Caribbean is still the same, except now our main pirate looks like Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow. The submarine voyage became Finding Nemo. These constant little tweaks and adaptations keep it fresh at Disney without being so different you lose the nostalgia factor and trigger ambiguity or uncertainty aversion. Enough remains the same to find that perfect balance of new and nostalgic. Because we have a bias for the familiar and love to share particularly great experiences with others, especially the next generation, it is important to keep some things static even over decades. Imagine if they were to tear down the iconic castle in the middle of Disneyland. How would the entire experience be impacted? Even taking the next generation on Pirates and seeing what's different and what's the same still has that feeling of nostalgia. You can remember how in your day it was a little different because... And this embracing of nostalgia goes beyond the parks. Their movies and merchandise build upon this concept as well. It isn't a coincidence that all the iconic animated movies are being remade into live action versions, or that Star Wars is adding on for this new generation with actually some animated versions as well as continuing the story. Being able to take my kids to see movies I remember loving as a child in our day, pulling out the VHS tape to watch Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast for the umpteenth time, and then taking them to see the new version and watch the old one together for good measure feels like a rite of passage. And it's something we can do now from the comfort of our couch thanks to Disney Plus. I want to see their faces and sing the songs and enjoy that time with them. Even discussing the past favorites with my husband is a joy, and it brings a rush of excitement as we experience this together, remembering what it was like when we were kids. Many of these new live-action versions are a shift from the original stories. Jasmine and Mulan were much more independent and strong without really revolving around getting a guy like they did in the original animated versions. I'll admit, I loved Mulan when it came out. I was a little older, but it was always one of my favorites, and the songs were a big part of that for me. So when I heard there wouldn't really be any singing in this one, that they were dropping those iconic tunes, I had some serious loss aversion. I kind of wanted to boycott the movie. Not that anyone would have been impacted but me, but it felt painful, like they were taking something away from my childhood. And then, perhaps fueled by the pandemic, and decided to watch it with the kids anyway. And I'm so glad that I did. It was a beautiful step in the right direction, building upon the movie and story I loved. And they used some instrumentals to have a nod to those great songs. So it all felt acknowledged. That nostalgia and expectation was satisfied in a way that surprised me. So I was delighted with the outcome. These are the same concepts as you see in the Disney park experiences, replicated for their movies and in many other areas of the brand, I'm sure. Now let's talk a little bit about novelty. Our brains love a little novelty, and Disney incorporates theirs along with the IKEA effect in many situations. While we have lazy brains and can put off big, challenging equations or tasks, our brains do love to feel smart and like we're in on a secret, like we know something special or can find something new and unique. Understanding this brainy benefit means Disney has little surprises throughout their parks. For example, the hidden Mickeys around Disneyland and Disney World, reportedly about 1,000 or more per park. They're hiding in plain sight, some easier spotted than others, on rides and in repairs to the concrete on the ground. All around, there are those 3 iconic circles in many sizes and materials. There are blogs and books dedicated to discovering hidden Mickeys, and people love to share them on social media when they discover them or tell others about it. That excitement and social proof becomes contagious and can keep people coming back to look for more and creating new fans who are excited about finding their own hidden Mickeys. Disney also does a great job of putting little Easter eggs in their movies, particularly in its subsidiary brands. I first noticed this when watching Monsters, Inc. At the end, when Boo is showing the toys in her room to Sully, she picks up various items, including a little stuffed Nemo and a Jessie doll from Toy Story 2. Here's the crazy thing. Finding Nemo came out 18 months after Monsters, Inc. That foresight meant incorporating something that wouldn't even be a blip for viewers for at least a year when previews for Finding Nemo started to hit. Potentially that was well timed with when it would be coming out on VHS and knowing that previews were coming at the same time, but they still had to think about and incorporate that years in advance, which is a really cool thing. In the Cars movie, while Lightning McQueen drives down the highway, you see for barely a second the birds from one of Pixar's short films sitting on a telephone wire. Of course, in Wreck-It Ralph, we have so many crossovers from the different universes throughout the internet, in Ralph Wrecks the Internet. And think about all those little crossover moments from the Marvel universe with little teasers at the end of the movie to set up something coming later, sometimes much, much later. Those little wins that help you feel smart also help you shape your experience with the brand. You look for more little hidden gems and get to be part of the magic, something that we love because of that IKEA effect. And speaking of the IKEA effect, what about the ears? People have been embroidering names onto Mickey ears for decades, and that helps you create your own memory and experience in a different way. And for many is likely something that you keep for years and years after your trip. Maybe you have them framed or something to remember what it was like when you went to Disneyland all those years ago, and your eyes could light up when you see them. Again, they could be priming other memories and conversations and talking about when you got your ears and how excited you were and being able to bond on that point with other people. And because they're yours, because you got to help pick them out, maybe the thread color, or you picked out your name was going to be written in what sort of font or whatever, it all makes a really big difference in how much you are emotionally bonded to the Disney brand. Being part of the fun and shaping the experience makes people like it more. And in Disney's case, it's also a great way to sell lots of other merchandise. Different characters pop up in all sorts of silly places, on hats and shirts and home decor. Even doing the research and plotting out the best path through the park, or planning a special tea with a princess, or whatever you choose to do, can help build on the experience in an amazing way that really endears the brand to the person creating that experience along with them. And before we stop talking about those Mickey ears, they have another important concept that comes into play here. If you're a longtime listener, you may remember me talking about the rose gold Mickey ears I got when we went to Disney a few years ago. And also you might be seeing them shared on social media and posts related to this particular episode. So keep a lookout for those. You can find me on all the socials as the Brainy Biz, B-I-Z. Apparently, these were really scarce when they first came out, and people were so excited to get them, many of which were resold on the internet since you can only buy specialty ears at a park or downtown Disney. Scarcity creates buzz and excitement. We herding humans love to follow the crowd, and if we see some social proof that an item is popular and in short supply, we can't help but get excited. And if the only place you can get the ears is at the park, it means you might make an extra trip to get some, or decide that now is the right time to plan a trip. It's a brilliant move from Disney, to be sure. I don't know that it was Disney's intention to have these particular ears be scarce, but if they did, and probably have done it since then, it was a stroke of genius. It generated so much buzz and excitement, and it's a great way to get people talking about you on your behalf. Having others spread the word about you and create their own fan version of your creations is another great reflection of how much people love Disney. It's a part of their identities because we grew up with the stories. Again, it comes back to nostalgia and a deep love and passion for the brand. The thoughtfulness and thorough planning from the Disney team feels like a gift. They're sharing the joy and magic with us in a way we can't help but share ourselves and get excited about and want to keep spreading that joy. This is an act of reciprocity. Hiding Mickeys and making magical experiences for us and our families is a big deal, whether we're streaming a movie at home or exploring a new attraction. I talked about some of this thoughtfulness with Jennifer Kleinhens when she was on the show, and we talked about the true end to an experience and how most brands get that wrong. She gave the example of Disney realizing that the true end of their experience wasn't when people left the park, but when they got home and had their photos developed, way back in the days of yore when we used film. So they worked with Kodak to determine the colors that would look best in pictures and painted them around the park on the streets and things like that to really help those photos pop and bring back the memories when you were reflecting on your trip many weeks or months or years down the line and making you yearn to come back. Sure, that's self-serving for Disney. It's good for them if you remember your experience fondly and want to come back. But it's also a thoughtful thing to do for the guest. You know they're going to be sharing those photos with people, and so really thinking through those experiences, caring that much, is a gift, and one that people repay Disney with by being loyal fans of the entire organization. One other way they integrate thoughtfulness is by making even the bad moments more than just tolerable, but an experience all their own. I'm, of course, talking about the lines at the park. Waiting 2 hours for a 4-minute ride would be pretty excruciating if there was nothing to distract you along the way. And because we humans get bored easily and suffer from idleness aversion, waiting in a long line with nothing to do would keep a lot of people from going to the park or ever coming back. Really think about the conversation they had to have to get to this point. If you were having this discussion in your business, do you think it would have been about making the experience delightful and magical, a ride all its own with lots of hidden gems and fun moments along the way? Or would you have said something like, well, that's just the way it is, or I guess we can make it a little less awful if we, or how can we help people tolerate this? Or even focusing on making the line just a few minutes shorter. Cutting down on wait time from 45 minutes to 30 is still a really long time to wait, even for something you're excited about. If this was the wait time to be seen at an insurance agency or bank or check out at the grocery store, it's going to feel even longer. And reducing the time even by a third doesn't have the same impact as making it fun and enjoyable while you wait. When there's something to do, it's easier to forget about how long you're waiting. Don't get me wrong, 2 hours is still a long time to wait in line, but as you think back to a time you went to Disneyland or Disney World, or if you haven't been and somebody's told you about their experience, are the lines even really remembered in a negative way? Probably not. It wasn't a peak moment, so it gets blended into the overall positive experience. Remember, it's about the peak and the end. If this line had nothing going for it, no engaging interactions or hidden Mickeys, it would have likely been a negative peak. It would corrupt the entire experience and be what you remember. Ugh, we stood in this line forever and the ride was so quick. What a waste. By making it fun, it levels out the experience and isn't a negative peak. The thrill of the ride becomes the peak, or the fireworks display, or finding a little surprise while you're waiting. And the themed line experience also helps build up anticipation, which is how the brain gets dopamine, a chemical it really loves. Turning that line into a dopamine-generating, anticipation-building experience is a great way to make it so we end up loving the thing we probably would have thought we would hate. That anticipation is made possible by making the experience fun and getting people excited about what is to come. And this is something Disney has been doing since the beginning. In October 1954, about 9 months before the park in Disneyland first opened, Walt Disney did a Disneyland series on ABC with a sneak peek at the park coming in July. This built up awareness, excitement, and of course, anticipation. When the park finally opened, the telecast on ABC attracted 90 million viewers, the largest audience on any single program at that time. And within 7 weeks of their grand opening, they welcomed the 1 millionth guest. Anticipation and excitement made that possible, and it's something you see in other areas as well. The most notable, of course, being the movie premiere or announcements of Disney Plus coming with the excitement of The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda. Their Instagram channels are filled with teasers of new merchandise you can find, and the Disney Channel promotes upcoming shows. Our brains love that little tease and waiting to see if something's going to live up to our expectations. We'll hype it up in our brains while waiting to see what happens. Will WandaVision live up to the hype? What the heck is going on there anyway? What about The Falcon and Winter Soldier or the new Loki show? Can Marvel translate into a series instead of blockbuster films? They let us know it was coming so we could build up our own hype and promote them in the process. A smart strategy, to be sure. I know I've talked about a lot of concepts today already, and as I said at the top of the show, there's so much more I could have brought in. Though I do want to touch on a couple more that are really important before we close out this episode today. First are a couple of our most fundamental concepts and really simple things that Disney has done for decades. Some of the guiding principles at Disney include Mickey's 10 commandments. Think of these like a handbook or a set of value statements. I'm not going to get into all of them, though I have linked to an article by our friend Jennifer Kleinhens, whom I've already mentioned in this episode, which talks about each commandment along with an underlying psychological principle that defines it. I'm also linking to a really well-timed article about what retailers can learn from Disney from an article that was created by Cowrie Consulting, which was founded by Jez Groom, one of the co-authors of the book Ripple with April Vellacott. They were on the show a few months back. Of course, both of those episodes are going to be linked in the show notes along with all sorts of other things. So on those 10 commandments of Mickey, the ones I really want to focus on today are avoid overwhelm and tell one story at a time. Having too much going on at once will make for a frustrating experience. Yes, there is a lot going on at a Disney park, much more than what most of us have going on in any of our businesses, and a lot that could happen in one of their movies or other crossovers. But if you make it simple, it's easier for people to move through, embrace, and love. Going back to the parks, there are a lot of ways where people could have a bad experience, getting turned around, having the magic lost when a character from Tomorrowland is walking through the Frontierland space, or missing a time to arrive for your Fast Pass window because you got distracted. When you expect error, a key concept of nudging, and think about all the ways to make it easy for people to not get stuck, to give them feedback along the way, it can make for a much better overall experience. And there are a lot of decisions to make during those long days at the park. Where to eat, which ride to go on first, who's taking little Susie to the bathroom, where are we going to meet up, what souvenirs do we get, this way or that way? It's endless, and the brain could get fatigued really easily if Disney didn't put so much thought into how those choices are presented and reducing overwhelm whenever they can. They also have their Imagineers going in and walking in the shoes of the park guests, experiencing it firsthand to see where people are getting stuck or ways that you can improve an experience all the time. This is a seemingly simple thing, but it makes all the difference for those who come to the park, whether it's their first time or 100th. The next foundational item is one of the simplest ones, which means it could be easy to overlook, but it's so critical to their overall experience. Consider the simple frame of being the happiest place on earth or where dreams come true. This frame works as a prime for the experience people have with the brand. It's a very simple tactic, but hugely important. Not only does it shape the customer experience, but it can shape the employee experience as well. Would the happiest place on earth have people walking around with garbage bags to toss out? No, they would build a whole functioning city underneath where items can be moved discreetly. If Disney's where dreams come true, can their movies or TV shows or characters include gore or horror? No, that's not what they're about. Building a business on a promise like that seems simple, but it isn't easy to remain the happiest place on earth for over 65 years. It takes that balance of nostalgia and new growth I talked about earlier, and a dedication to the cause that continues to shape everything they do. One of the things I found particularly interesting about Disney is the process the Imagineering team goes through when it's time to come up with a new ride or show or other feature at any of the parks, resorts, cruise ships, or real estate developments around the world. As they say, going through a process of making the impossible possible means a lot of variety from one project to the next. So they leave lots of room to let each one have a flexible approach. However, because there is some framework needed, they have a set of questions to help guide every project. And you know, I love a great set of questions. So let's talk about them here. And you can think about how you could use these in your own business. These include asking, what could it be? Which they call their blue sky phase, kind of like looking out into the horizon. If we were to imagine something new, what could we create? This would be just what I would call question storming instead of brainstorming, but really just looking into the future to say, if we were making the impossible possible, what would that look like? The next phase is the concepting phase, and they say, what is it? Then they ask, what will it take to make it real, which is looking at their feasibility. What are the details to bring it to life? This is design. And how do we build it? Production. How does it all fit together? Installation. And how did we do opening day and beyond, looking back before you go on to your next blue sky project? I'm going to repeat those questions for you again here now. What could it be? What is it? What will it take to make it real? What are the details to bring it to life? How do we build it? How does it all fit together? How did we do? Think about an experience that customers have with your business, your offerings, or even going through your website. What if you asked yourself and your team questions like this before you even got started? Even the simple, what could it be, has so much more opportunity than the questions we so often ask ourselves that are so limiting. And what details can bring it to life? That shapes a very different experience than asking how long will it take, or who needs to be on the team, or how can it be most efficient? Asking great questions adds to that thoughtfulness and makes your entire brand experience different, quite possibly one your customers will love and share about if you really think about them as you go. Now, one last point before we wrap it up. This is inspired by a Forbes article I found, which you know is waiting for you in the show notes, along with those many, many other articles I found about Disney. In this article, the author talks about content management and how Disney's approach is so different than what the rest of us tend to do, and why it's better and something we can all learn from. If you were going to embark on a content management or content marketing strategy, you might look to incorporate story to make it interesting. You've heard of this before and you see it around, so you start looking for or creating a narrative that aligns with the message you've decided you want to sell a particular product or service you have in the mix. That's the standard approach. We have something to sell, so we look to create a story to make it memorable and appealing for someone to buy. But that's not what Disney does. Disney starts with a great story and then says, what can we build around that story? It might be content or an experience or merchandise, but it's secondary to the tale we love. He gave an example of Frozen in the article. In case you don't know, this is one of the most successful movies Disney has ever created. It went totally bonkers and resulted in lots of revenue-generating items for Disney. Cruises, costumes, collectibles, stuffed animals, bedding, you name it. And we've got a lot of it here too. Think if they decided to start with a toy doll that would be an ice princess named Elsa, and then decided to make up a little story about her so she had that background and was a little more appealing. It might have sold okay, but it wouldn't be the mega hit that was Frozen. Everyone wants the doll because it's a reminder of that great story. Seeing a doll on its own doesn't drive your excitement in the same way, even if you hear the story afterwards. What if your brand started with a story and then looked for products or services that supported that? Would it make a difference in how people engage with you? Of course, you don't have to be creating blockbuster movies to get this benefit. Just try and start with a story. To quote Simon Sinek, start with your why. Know what you are about, why you exist, and how you're creating value in the world. Then look for ways to incorporate that brain friendliness to make the best possible experience. As you saw today, there are so many interspersed concepts from behavioral economics intertwined throughout the Disney brand and its multiple business lines. Hopefully that's inspiring to you, an opportunity to start testing and incorporating some of the concepts you heard about today to be a little more like Disney. Whether it is some great framing, nudges, nostalgia, idleness aversion, or so many other concepts, Disney is an inspiring brand that we can all learn a little something from. Hopefully, I helped spark some of that inspiration, a little magic, for you here today. And if you are inspired to go read more about Disney and some of the cool stuff they do, start with the show notes. I have linked to a ridiculous amount of articles there, as well as a lot of past episodes for the concepts mentioned throughout the show today. I really hope you liked this episode on the behavioral economics of Disney. So, what got your brain buzzing as you learned about the behavioral economics of Disney today? For me, I love how thoughtful Disney is in their experiences. And whenever I think of Disney now, I always think of the balance of novelty and nostalgia. Something I talked about with Prince Guman when he was on the show discussing why we like the things we like. Disney is really mastering that by understanding how much people want to share moments and insights from their own childhood with their future generations, or just to relive the good old days and be a kid again. I'm also reminded of a great story that Jennifer Kleinhens shared when she was on the show to discuss her book, Choice Hacking, which also made it into my book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, about the peak end rule and how Disney understood the true end to their experience, something that way too many companies get wrong. They knew that the experience didn't end when someone left the park, but it was back in the day when this was a thing, when the pictures got developed and we got to reminisce and relive the experience and share it with friends and family. So Disney worked with Kodak to paint the park in colors that would look best when printed on the photo paper. Amazing. That helps those memories to feel special and make the experience end on the best note instead of one of disappointment. We all had those moments, if you ever had to process film, where you got your photos back from the trip and they looked terrible or were dark or blurry or fuzzy. And I guess they couldn't have helped for those people that, had the lens cap closed or something. But in general, it made a real difference for people. And those amazing stellar pictures help make the memories be stronger, and it makes you want to come back and do it all again. That episode with Jen talking even more about this is linked for you in the show notes, as well as the past ones with Troy Campbell and my conversation with Prince Guman and so much more, as well as related books and other goodness. It's all in the show notes, which can be found within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/292. And just like that, episode 292 on the behavioral economics of Disney is done. Join me Friday for a brand new episode with Troy Campbell on multi-narrative storytelling. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.